Hi, I'm Deanna. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. Today I have a video especially for Marie. I'm going to be talking about a couple things in today's video. One of them is punching with wool strips as opposed to wool. And the other is working on a project that I'm starting for cocktail time tonight, which is an alphabet soup project. I literally just drew up because I had a bit of a brainstorm, something like this that I'm drawing directly onto canvas. The theme of cocktail tonight is alphabets in rug hooking. And one of them is Nancy Thomas's that I license and I put out. And the other one that I'm looking at tonight is the Patty Yoder book, which is so beautiful, her alphabet with all of the sheep. So it got me thinking about alphabets and alphabet soup, and I started drawing my own alphabet. So I was drawing it straight onto canvas. I don't typically use blue. I like to just use black, but I used so much black and I made so many mistakes and the sewing machine stopped working. So there's been a few setbacks. I just kept going with the blue. It is what it is. It's going to give me a great chance to show you how hooking, or rather punching, with wool strips is going to work in these two styles of Oxford punch needles. So these are Amy Oxford punch needles. This is a 10 regular and a 10 fine. So when we're working with yarn, and I've done a lot of punching with yarn videos, you always have the thought with the fine one, you know, you want to take out your sock yarn, your lace yarns, your very lightweight yarns, sometimes a sport or a DK, but if it's too thick, it's going to snag in the punch needle. Everything else goes with yarn into the regular needle, which has a much bigger hole, as you can see, much bigger. So it's a question of threading it, making it work that way. Now, it's a little bit different with wool strips. You get different sizes of wool strips. I'm starting with a 3. Let me show you what I'm doing down here. I'm cutting up a few strips. The alphabet soup, I've got all my sort of reds and shades of red here to be able to do that. I already cut a few strips. I cut these all in 5, some shades of the tomato, and then I cut these in also a 5. I've got a bunch of 8s too. I can always change the head on that for an 8. But I want to cut some 3s. So I just changed my Fraser, my Bliss, and I'm just going to tighten it up a little bit. And I'm going to cut some 3s in here too. And we're going to see which ones are going to work best with the various punch needles here. The fine versus the, let me do a darker one. The fine versus the regular. So let's see how this goes. I just put the head on, so you got to tighten it up. That's the good thing about these little Blisses. They're such pretty enamel-y looking things, and they go the miles. But every time you turn it on, you got to tighten it a little bit more. It doesn't take long to change the head, so it's easy going. Why is it like that? There we go. So let me get some 3s out. 3s, you're going to see, you probably know already, 3s are quite thin. So let's look at the 3. Quite thin, right? 3 versus, for example, 5. Quite a big difference. So let's see what we get. Let's see what we get. If you were trying to punch with one of these 2 punch needles, let's see what is going to work. Now again, if you're new to punching or you're just used to punching yarn rather than strips, be prepared for some snagging if you haven't got your sizes worked out. This is the reason that so many people buy multiple of the Amy Oxford punch needles. Because you want the variety. The number refers to the height or the pile, but then there's the regular and the fine, which refers to what can go through the eye of it. A camel or a thread, in other words. So let's start with the regular. With the regular, I'm going to put through one of my thicker ones. Let me put through a 5 and see how that goes. With the regular, unlike the fine, and I've said this before, the fine has the little loop that kind of holds it in place like a little eyelet. The regular doesn't. With the regular, you're literally just feeding it in. I do that instinctively, lick it as if that's going to help, as if it's a thread. But it's quite a big eye. So I'm literally just pulling it in and then pulling it down. I'm pulling it down pretty straight. I'm going to straighten it out, you'll see. Putting it right into that channel where it goes, right? Just pulling it into the channel, getting it in there so that I have it kind of sticking out the top. Now it's in there pretty good. Let's see what we get. I'm going to pull you down here onto, now I've got this on my quilt hoop. These are the stepped sort of lap hoops that I really like working with. They can be tight as a drum. This one's not super tight as a drum, but you know that with punching it's really important that you're as tight as you can be because it'll really help with the effort of punching, and it'll help you get right into the right holes, etc., etc., particularly with the regular because it's such a broad, large tip. So get it as tight as you can. If you're really having a struggle and you feel it really dipping down, just take off this outer hoop and wrap it with some other fabric, just a few wraps of any extra fabric you've got lying around, then put it back on and you'll see that it holds a lot tighter. So let's see what we get. I always tend to push up where I am with my finger just so I can get that counter sort of balance of pushing down with the needle versus pushing up with my fingers. So the ghostly fingers under there. So let's just randomly go in and do a few punches with the 10 regular with the loops. I'm going to show you. And just like with anything, I'm dragging it across. I'm dragging the tip across until the tip finds the next hole. I can feel that it finds the next logical place to go. That one it jumped. Because if you lift it up too high, you are going to get a break, a holiday, a bit of a mess up. So that little strip only got me that far. Now you can see, as with, that wasn't perfect punching on my part, and this is a 10. So let's look at what the right side looks like. It's going to be a bit of a, let me see. Let's unwind. We'll just do it. We'll just go for it. Let's see what we get. It was pretty close. There was one little jump up. I want to show it to you because if you're new to punching, some people post pictures and they say, why is this happening? And they have a lot of loop-de-loops on the reverse side, the wrong side, and it's because you lifted up a hair. You see, I lifted up just a hair, and this one is different than the others. So that's what happens when you do your liftins up. So this is what I've got. I punched them too close together. So I'm going to punch them further apart next time around, but I've got a nice pile, and they're sticking up real evenly, and they came out really even. So let's do this again. I'm going to pull it back out. Let's punch again a little bit further apart. I think in my head I'm thinking I'm using my fine because 99.99% of the time I use my fine. I just sort of prefer the fine. It's an easier job punching. But the point that I'm trying to get across, which I hope I am, is that I think the main thing, particularly with a strip like this, again, this is a number 5, I think the main thing that people think, I put it in the wrong way again, is that you're not going to be able to get it to lay flat. You know, 'cause as with hooking, everybody has that terrible experience of having it sort of flip and twist your wool strip as you hook. It tends to strip, twist and strip all that stuff underneath. But it can be a real sort of bear of a thing for beginners. And I guess you would expect, because with hooking it's easy to accidentally twist, I guess you would expect that with punching it would be even easier to accidentally twist, and it really isn't. So I'm going back in. I'm going to go a little bit further between each loop because I've got the regular. So I can feel my tip scraping along, and every time, I'm doing it fairly exaggerated to show you, but every time I'm going right down to the hilt of the punch needle. I'm not really following lines, I'm just going for effect here. And there we go. So I didn't really come up on this one. This was better in that way. Now let's see what our loops look like, a little bit more spaced out. But you can see I'm not really putting any thought or effort into the way that I'm holding the punch needle, even with a wider cut like a 5. And despite that, I really am getting a nice, even, flat result. And now this is a little bit too far apart for me, but I'll fix it. You see there's a little holiday right here. But at the end of the day, we got some nice loops that are standing up really nice. This one's a little bit lower. I would tend to fool with that with my hook. But they are coming out flat, and they're coming up in a channel the way that you would expect them to. So they are not twisting. Now, the regular punch needle that I was just using, again, I tend to use the fine almost all the time. The 5s that I was just using in that one are not going to fit in the fine. There's just no way that's going to happen, right? This is a needle, whatever through the eye of a needle. It's not of a camel through the eye of a needle, right? It's not going to happen. So if I were to force it, let me see if I even can force it. With this one, just so you know, and I know I've said this before, you're threading it through this eyelet. And number 5 doesn't even want to go through the eyelet, right? So that's going to be a thing. Let's see what we can do. I'm not a magician, right? I'm just going to see if there's any chance of getting the 5 through here for the sake of experimentation. So it does go through, right? So I've got it into the channel. I've got the number 5 into the channel of the fine. I suspect I know what's going to happen. To be honest, I've never done this with the 5 because I'm not sure that it's going to work. Let's see what we get. We're going to get what we get and we don't get upset, right? Let's see. Now, if you can see what's happening here, as I punch, it's pulling out. You see all these blank holes? The reason it's pulling out is because it's snagging, because it's too tight. It's not going to work. It's a technical problem that you cannot fix. This is the wrong needle for a strip this wide. So I'm going to pull this out. A 5 will not work in a fine. You're going to be looking at something that is more like your thin yarn. So let's look at the 3s that we just did. I just had my little 3s out, and you saw me cut them, right? I'm not losing my mind. Yes, I am. Here they are. So this is going to be a lot thinner than a 5. 3 versus 5. It's going to be a lot thinner. Let's see how this goes. Again, I'm putting this, just showing you the threading, through here, going along my little English channel here, and out the hole. I'm trying to keep it fairly flat. Even though a 3 is super skinny, it still has the possibilities of twisting, right? Now, weirdly, this one is even harder to get through the needle. There we go. I bet you're all better threaders than I am. So let's put it back into its little channel. It's putting it back in its little channel, lying straight. It always looks like a hypodermic of some sort at this stage. So I've got my 3 right in here, ready to go. Now let's see what happens with the 3. I'm just going to run a straight line here. Now, again, I want to tell you, just like with yarn, if you're more used to punching with yarn, you're just, again, dragging the tip to the next hole, right? I'm so used to I made that mistake with the regular because I'm used to going pretty close to the back of the loop before. This is what the fine does. You get real close to the loop before you. I must have pulled up there because it pulled out and I'm getting fine there. But let's see what we've got. It's no problem to punch. It's no problem at all to punch, right? It's going in just like yarn would go in, just like hooking would go in, and it's going in again flat, right? That might seem impossible, and yet it does. Now, it didn't come out great on this side, but you can see I've got all my little bits. I didn't do it straight at all, and one of them was like ripping in half. So for me, punching with the really fine 3 is a little bit of an ordeal in a different way because it wants to break. It's thin enough that it wants to break a little bit. This is nice door wool, so it's not like it's recycled wool or something. I would tend to, again, pull these up with hooks to get the ones that are not really compliant, like this guy in the middle, to come up. But some of the loops came up just great. The main thing is they're coming up straight, right? They're coming up like in line with each other. They're not twisting as they go. And again, you would expect that they might, but they're not. So regarding the punching with the regular with something more like a 5, the 5 is going to have more integrity. It's a bit of an ordeal for a thin strip like the 3, in my opinion, to go through a fine punch needle. There's a lot, there's a sharp hole, the eyelet in the needle, there's this eyelet here, there's the long channel. It will go, but I find there's a little bit more breakage with the thinner ones than with the thicker ones, even between a 3 and a 5. But we know that the 5 won't go into the fine. So if you're going to be punching something really small, you're still going to want to stick with the fine needle for a number 3. Now let's do one more experiment. So the information, just to recap, that I've gotten so far is no matter what number you choose, you're probably not going to experience an issue with your wool strips wanting to twist. So if that was one of the thoughts you had sort of in the back of your mind, that you were afraid your strips were going to twist because it was a needle and not a hook, it's probably not going to happen. It doesn't happen rampantly. It could once in a while happen, but it doesn't happen rampantly. Again, I find personally, I don't really use 3s for much unless it's extreme face detailed or eyeballs or something like that. I don't love a 3. It's a bit fine for me. Hooking with the 3, I think, is always tricky. Punching with the 3 for me is always tricky, but the punching with the 3 for me has the added element of the possibility of it getting rumpled or ripped or whatever because it is fairly fine. It is the right size to use the fine needle for the 3 if you love your 3s and you have those 3s. So I'm going to put you on pause for a minute, and I am going to, I thought I had, no, you know what, I have some more 8s. Let's do some 8s. I have some 8 stuff in my tidbit bowl. I'm going to take out a much wider one. This is an 8. I'm going to take out this one. And let's see how 8 goes through the regular. Needless to say, we already know it's not going to go through the fine because the 5 wouldn't go through the fine. So let's put the 8 through the regular and see what happens. Put it through like right down here, right into the channel. Again, when I'm threading it, I'm laying it flat just to encourage it to be good. Getting it right in there. An 8 is a lot thicker than a 5. I'll show you the comparison in just a minute. There we go. Right, so that's the number 8. Let me show you an 8 versus a 5. So 8, 5, and then I'll put the 3 next to it just to drive the point home. 3 is quite thin, right? 8, 5, 3. So let's see what we get with the punch needle with the 8 in it. Suspense. Will it want to flip around and do tricks, or will it work the way that the others have worked and lay nice and flat? I'm not going to be using blue in my tomato soup, don't worry. I haven't lost my mind quite that much. And again, with the regular, I'm skipping a couple of, I'm not as tight as a drum either, skipping a couple of loops each time. Just want to see what the effect is on the other side. So it's pretty obvious that in doing this, it's not flipping around and doing tricks. It's just fine. I'm going to pull it out here, and let's see what we've got on the other side. So all in all, using your punch for your strips is going to work great. That's why people do it. So again, very nice little sort of cascade of loops. Nice height, nice, I haven't got them perfectly straight, but nice arrangement. This is a 10, so this isn't a super high pile. The 9 I used in the last video was a much higher pile. But they're coming out nice and flat. You're going to be able to control even an 8 through the regular punch needle, right? You're going to be able to control this really well, where you're going and where you're not going. You're going to be able to do outlining and framing things really beautifully with this. And with the finer one, you will be able to get your thinner number 3, number 4, number 5s in there. Anything above that, you know, you just want to probably break off using the fine at a 3 or a 4. Anything above that, I would switch to the regular. Just because we saw that once it snags, it no longer plays along. So you really need to use the right needle with the right sized strip. And Amy Oxford has all this information on her website. When you're picking out your punch needle, you already know, well, I know I love working with 3, so I'm going to have to get the fine without a doubt. Or I know I love doing primitive and I love working with 8s. Well, then you're certainly not going to get the fine. But if you're like me and you like to do a little bit of each, or you like to do a little bit of outlining, or you add a little bit of something with your sock yarns or whatever, you do want that fine needle. I use my fine needle mostly, but this one is good for covering territory. The primitive wider strips going through the regular size, you know, you get a lot more speed with something like this. You're not going into every hole, and you're covering land a lot more quickly than you would with the fine one, which is pretty much into every hole, like pixelation. So completely different, but your wool strips, again, with your 3, I would stop at a wool strip size 3 or 4 tops. Starting at a 5, I would choose the regular. That's what I would do. Based on what I've played with before, based on what I just showed you, what wants to go through and what doesn't, just make a good decision about that. And remember, when you get your hook, that only the fine one has the eyelet at the bottom. So don't think it's incomplete if you get this one. Otherwise, they look pretty much the same, right? And the peacock ones are still out on the Amy Oxford site if you're interested in those. So I hope that helped with visualizing what it's going to be like to use your strips instead of your yarn with punching. I tend to punch with yarn almost exclusively, but the strips they're easy and they're fast. And if you've already got them and you've got your color scheme arranged and you've got them cut, or you're into your hit or miss grab bag, it's not a bad idea to take out a punch needle and run them through there and see how it goes. You're not going to get the fuss with it that I think a lot of people expect to get. You're not going to get that. And it's not that different than punching with yarn. All in all, it's really not that different. You're sort of, one of the benefits that I always say with the punch needle over the hook is that it's very hard to twist, particularly with yarn. It's very hard to get that frustrating twist if you're a beginner, if you're using a punch needle. It just doesn't want to do that. Your hook is a different story because it's your finger underneath that's accidentally twisting it when you hook up. The punch needle is a little machine and it won't do that. It's not impossible, but chances are you won't have that dynamic in your punching with wool strips or your punching with yarn. It's fun both ways. So I hope that helped to see me punching with wool strips between number 5s and number 8s. And maybe now you know a little bit about which one you should choose if you're in the Amy Oxford store or on Etsy shopping for a punch needle. Definitely worth giving it a shot. It's lots of fun, something different, right? I will see you tonight for cocktail night. We'll talk about alphabet soup and all the possibilities there. Have a great day, everybody. I just want to add one other little thing that I like to sometimes do. I know it's not for everybody, but I like to do the hooking and the punch combined. So I'm just going to show you how that's going to work for this alphabet soup piece. What I'm doing right here now, I have hooked, if you can see on the right side, I'm on the wrong side now, the back side, in other words. I have hooked, if you can see, some of my letters, right, the back of, well, this is reversed, so I'm looking at it reversed, the camera is flipped, but always, and 2. So I've got those hooked on the front, and now I've got my punch needle, and I've got the number 3 back in it, and what I'm doing to the back of the hooked letters. Now I don't have any clues on this side because this is the wrong side, right? And when you're punching, you're always looking at the back side going backwards to forward. So you're looking at the wrong side when you're punching, and you have all the information, meaning the drawing where you're punching. But in this case, my drawing is on the other side, and I have hooked the words, some of the words, and now I'm using my fine to come in here and do a little bit of outlining around the letters, because I can see just where the loops are comings and goings, and I know I'm gonna get a good outline. Let me get you right over me so you can see. I know I'm gonna get a good outline using the fine right against the edge of the loops here. Oops, sorry, you were just off camera. But you can see how well it is outlining, being really careful. And that was the end of that. So you can see how well it works for outlining my letters like that. You know, I know a lot of people punch and use the wrong side, meaning the back side of the loop. Then you would want a very, very, very low pile, of course. You wouldn't go for a 9, you would go for something like a 13, 14, one of the minis. If you were doing that. Some people like the way that the back of it looks, and I can see why, because you can get really clean lines with the back of a punch needle. So I'm going to keep going with this, and I'm going to outline my letters with the fine using the 3 strips, wool strips, and then I'm going to flip back over and show you how I'm going to fill in with my hook. It's just a preference thing. It's just something, you know, everybody has their own ways and their own hacks and their own shortcuts for what feels right. For me, I like to hook letters, and since this is an alphabet soup, I've got some words in here, and it works really well with the fine, with the 3s. A couple of them broke a little bit, but you know, got some momentum going, and it goes okay outlining them, and then I'm going to flip it back to the correct side and hook everything in between in a wider strip to get some speed going. So I'll show you how that looks as soon as I flip this back around. And again, when you're thinking about doing something like tracing letters like I am right now, I actually prefer using, this is a different, I was using my number 10 fine, right? And this is my number 13 fine. So these are quite different too. And the difference is the pile. Remember at the beginning I was saying the difference is going to be the pile with the numbers. You only have 2 choices in terms of fine versus regular, but then the numbers refer to the pile, how high you want the loop to be. And I don't like the loop too high, particularly with outlining. So I switched to my number 13 fine, which I think works a lot better with outlining, and it still has the number 3 strip in it, which is okay. It's not my favorite combo, but it's going to be someone else's favorite combo, punching with number 3 strips. they have a good run, and then they seem to want to do some tricks at the end, which I find all tricks frustrating. I have a hair sort of a trigger. So let's see, that was the end of that one. But you can see it goes really well. It goes nice and fast. And I think probably for myself, the thing that I will be using the 3s for more often than not is outlining if I'm using my punch needle. Because 3 is not my go-to in any scenario. But with the punch, I think I'm going to go to it 9 out of 10 times when I'm doing outlining like this, because it goes fast. And when you're thinking about see, this is a snag kind of a situation. It seems to me I have it more with the 3s than I do with the wider strips. So I like punching with the wider strips, and I love punching with yarn, but I'm finding a lot of trouble for myself. I'm sure there's lots of hacks and tricks, and like everything else, you get used to it. For me, it's less fun punching a 3 strip than it is punching a much wider strip. So back to this, and then we'll see how it comes out on the other side. So I'm just going to actually stop there with that and flip it over, and let's see what we've got. If you're considering doing a combo of hooking and punching, then this is kind of the routine that you're going to be performing soon. So I've got my letters in there. You can see the punching around them worked out really good. I'm real happy with that. And now what I would do is, for myself, I would get my hook back out and start doing some filling in around with hooking. And again, depends on who you are and what you like, on what kind of combo you like to do, but I like to do combos. And now that I've got some kind of definition that went really fast with the fine punch needle, it's going to be that much easier for me to fill in and hook all around the rest of it. So this is what I call a combo. Again, it's not for everybody. A lot of people like to do one or the other, but I find that both work, and I'm usually in a bit of a hurry trying to get stuff out, trying to get patterns out. I don't have a ton of time to hook. So doing something like this where I use the punch needle for some speed, and then I come back and I do filling in with my hook, for me that works good. So this is the way it's going to go until coffee time. So anyway, this is how this works. I hope that was a good little sort of addendum to that, because there's so many combos of what you can do. So think about what all your choices are. Don't overwhelm yourself with choices. Just think about what your choices are. Figure out what's working. And if you're doing something with a hook or with a punch needle where you're getting a lot of grief and aggravation, then you need to rethink it immediately before you go so far that you get frustrated and you want to give up on it, or you think there's something wrong with you. Unlike cooking, it's usually some kind of a technical failure that you're having, some kind of hand-tool combination or tool-tool combination. There are so many ways that things can go a little bit wonky and become needlessly difficult. So make sure that you stop when you're experiencing what you think is an abnormal amount of grief and figure out whether you've got the right punch needle, whether what you're doing makes sense. It's good to watch videos like this. There's lots out there showing you people using these different numbers with different combinations of strips, so that you know what is to be expected, you know what's realistic, and most importantly, you know what's impossible. Because if you accidentally do the impossible, then that will cause a lot of grief and aggravation. So nobody needs that. Nobody's got time for that. I will see you later tonight for cocktail night. Have a great day.